Maybe one day, Novak Djokovic and the people of Australia will stop in the middle of their argument with their bottom lips quivering and just kiss it all out, right there in front of all the cameras, while in the background the studio audience gasps and whoops, and we cut tantalizingly to the break with a jaunty bass solo. Sounds like a proper cinematic ending, but perhaps we are not there yet. Judging by the scattered boos and jeers from the crowd as news filtered through that Novak Djokovic was retiring with injury after the first set of his Australian Open semi final on Friday against Alexander Zverev, it seems there is still some way to go in that cinematic narrative arc. Either way, Novak Djokovic and Australia remains an epic sporting two-hander, albeit one that is sometimes shadowed by some talk that this might be it, that Novak Djokovic might not return to Australia again. Following this late blooming coda to the career of arguably the greatest individual sportsperson the world has ever seen. At the end of the day, it was a strangely brittle 80 minutes on court with Alexander Zverev in Melbourne. On Tuesday, Novak Djokovic had spoken about feeling the painkillers wear off mid press conference after the full body agony of his quarter-final victory against Carlos Alcaraz. 2 days later, his first two service games under that hard yellow Australian sun lasted a combined 18 minutes, with four break points to be saved and one pirouetting 27-shot rally of death in the opening game. Alexander Zverev is 4 inches taller than Novak Djokovic. He is 10 years younger and perfectly chiseled, approaching the net like an iron giant rising up out of the waves. A fully operational Novak Djokovic might have won that first set tiebreak, but his entire career supremacy is based on extreme, unanswerable physicality, on pushing himself beyond the normal limits of human beings, of twang and flex. Djokovic also needs to be able to walk at the end of all of this. Remember that. He knew he was done. Afterwards, it was touching to hear Alexander Zverev talking like a dad at a wedding, calling for a little warmth and fellow feeling for his defeated opponent. And to hear the home crowd in Australia offer up affectionate applause in response was encouraging. Is that really going to be the final story beat here? Is this going to be enough? For so long, Novak Djokovic was the least remarked of the big three, comprising of Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, and Novak Djokovic. They were at the top of the men's tennis. The other guy was always Novak Djokovic. Because the other two, Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer, were more popular, almost sainted. They were stylish and frankly, they were dull in comparison to Novak Djokovic. Djokovic has now emerged on the numbers as the greatest of them all. The statistics in this case do not lie. But it was Australia 2022 to 2025 that gave him a violently engrossing late career arc that is frankly beyond the capacity of either Roger Federer or Rafael Nadal. The part dealing with the pandemic was entirely Novak Djokovic's own fault, or you can say own credit, depending upon your perspective on this issue. There was a maddening arrogance to Novak Djokovic's attempts to enter Australia in 2022. He was fully demonized for this. We got protests and courtroom scenes. Australian news anchors were hot mic calling Djokovic something I can't pronounce on this channel. The Prime Minister Scott Morrison waded in, sensing an easy target. Look away from the failed policies. Check out Spinach Boy Novak Djokovic and his dodgy visa. All of this was politically motivated. One cannot deny that. And depending upon, again, your perspective, you might choose one side or the other. I choose no side on this issue. This was followed by a white-hot arc of revenge. Political sympathies might have prevented some people from really enjoying Novak Djokovic's on-court performance, but it was deliciously realized and objectively very funny. Morrison lost the election. Djokovic returned in 2023 and skidded his way through the tournament en route to victory and the captive cheers of the crowd at the Australian Open, literally cuffing aside at least one of his most public critics on the court. And even now, this thing keeps claiming victims. Has anyone ever been more wrong than banterous Channel 9 broadcast guy Tony Jones and his mocking chant at the Serbian fans? Novak is a has been? It would seem not. Novak is overrated. Again, probably the opposite. He is probably underrated. Send him home? You did do that once, but you can't do that anymore, even though he is foreign. I consider it to be humor. Again, incorrect. Although, to be fair, this is the first funny thing you've said. The most interesting part of the Channel 9 affair was the way it brought us back to the wider world, to political opportunism, to Donald Trump, and the endless barking tribalism that has clung to Novak Djokovic over the past 4 years, and which is also the biggest bar to appreciating just how great Novak Djokovic is. Did you pay sufficient attention to Donald Trump's endless executive orders this week? I mean, to the fine print about exactly why we need a rule that all Apple turnovers must be rectangular because we have the best Apple turnovers, really admirable, the very finest Apple turnovers. This is the Trump method. Comment only on issues that exist in those golden overlapping vectors of instantly emotive and totally incidental to the things you're going to do. Sport is the world's largest public address system. So Donald Trump often comes wading in here too. From his sub-dom relationship with Gianni Infantino to Novak Djokovic and Australia via his mouthpiece Elon Musk, who this week condemned Channel 9 News as a negativity filter, speaking via post on his own global negativity filter, also known as X. This is the key angle on Novak Djokovic right now. Hands off, rabble-rousers. Step away. Sport wants its court back. Allow us to consider just its greatness on court, if only because this is also a very useful exercise in trying to peer through the general veil of, again, a word I can't pronounce here, but let's think of it as a substitute for organic manure. And Novak Djokovic is clearly the greatest. There was a lot of numbers talk around the Australian Open about the need to win Grand Slam number 25, which, let's face it, is not a real requirement. Novak Djokovic would have struggled to beat Yannick Sinner in the final, who, remember, isn't 39 years old or falling apart, but it doesn't really matter. He is already the greatest tennis player out there, operating in absolute defiance of normal physical laws of the game of tennis as well as of the human physical body. And from there, he is also arguably the greatest individual sports person, if only because people tend to forget how difficult the game of tennis really is. Not just for its high speed physics and all body athleticism, but for the mental aspect of it. The best bit in Challengers, essentially a film about buttocks with some tennis sprinkled in, is when someone says tennis is about having a relationship, the moments of extreme competition where you come to understand your own opponent completely. This quality was present in Novak Djokovic's defeat of Carlos Alcaraz on Tuesday. Part of Novak Djokovic's greatness is the ability to learn about an opponent mid-match and only then to work his way up into the Novak zone, that superhero filter where astonishing timing combines with preternatural agility, where there is suddenly no way of countering this furious, relentlessly fluid substance called Novak Djokovic from across the net. It has been hard to concentrate on this in recent years. Because of other issues related to the pandemic, Novak Djokovic has entered an awkward space, perceived as some kind of libertarian warlord highwayman and hostage to either blanket condemnatory rage or unquestioning hero worship. In reality, Novak Djokovic's refusal to get vaccinated wasn't bound up in any coherent political thought. It was more a personal foible related to his obsession with intake and purity and also controlling every aspect of his physique. Novak Djokovic has never condemned vaccines as an alien something conspiracy or talked about a global witch supremacy intent on chemtrailing the woke virus into your water supply. Novak Djokovic is basically a nerd, a sui generis but also very modern figure, obsessed with diet, wellness, and physical health. He is into people in robes talking about energy, goggles that block out the energy from plug sockets, filtering your water through grass fed stick insect legs. From that peculiar place, he has been scooped up by opportunists, hoisted as a very blunt figurehead in the wider war between trust, autonomy, freedom stuff, secret elites, and all the other illogical stuff that floats around on the internet. It feels politically radical at this stage, a break from the phony wars, a reference to the Second World War for you history enthusiasts, to say, can we just appreciate Novak Djokovic for what he is, the greatest at the sport of tennis, and perhaps at any individual sport? Australia has been the main stage for those fraught final years. Perhaps that round of applause in Melbourne really could be an agreeably human final note to Novak Djokovic. The inspiration for this piece comes from one of my favorite sports journalists, Barney Ronay, and his recent article in The Guardian. Please do check it out.